Hello. Veterans Council of Veterans recently launched a podcast called Veteran Suicide, the Local Solution. We named it that because we believe that veteran suicide is a national problem, but it has a local solution. And that local solution is the community. It involves everyone in the community to actually have an impact on trying to prevent veteran suicide. I'm introducing today episode 7, which is called Faith and Veteran Suicide. And it's because I believe that faith has a role in when it comes to suicide prevention. In fact, faith is one of the things that actually involve suicide and all of its suicide prevention aspects. It involves suicide awareness, suicide intervention, and unfortunately suicide postvention. And postvention, for those who have not heard that term before, is when a veteran does die by suicide and it's the family now who have to take on that burden to keep moving forward. So with this episode of Faith and the Veteran Suicide, one of the things that I do know is based on the congressional research record, 73% of military service members have a faith, and the faith is very diverse, but faith is still important. And even when it comes to suicide prevention, you always try to identify protective factors, and one of the protective factors is the faith, the belief in faith. So with this conversation we'll have, it will be one of our first steps in trying to include faith as part of the solution. I'm excited to announce some of the members of this panel will be from the community. We got Pastor James Williams, who is the pastor, he's called servant leader for the Mount Olive AME. We also have Guy Drab. Guy Drab has a distinguished career in the military, started at West Point, did some time in the Army, then he switched over to the Navy and became a chaplain. So he has tons of experience when it comes to veteran suicide and the veteran military culture. We also have Chris Ireland, who is a pastor for the Florida Compass. And finally, we have Barry Roberts. Barry Roberts is the American Legion Department Chaplain, and he has also been very involved in veteran suicide throughout the state of Florida, and he is a part of our coalition called the Florida Veterans Coalition. So what are we going to talk about in this? I'll tell you one first thing I'll let everybody know. This is not a sermon, and it's not about preaching. We're not trying to preach to the choir. We're trying to provide insights on how we can be effective when it comes to veteran suicide to the faith-based community. We're going to ask some tough questions. We're going to ask questions like, is suicide a sin? And how does it affect the person, the veteran who died by suicide, as far as going to heaven, hell, whatever, in the family? We want to see if there's any programs within the faith-based community when it comes to veteran suicide, and also intervention and prevention. We want to know what they're doing, these churches and leaders, of having that conversation, starting that conversation. Who's involved in that conversation? We want to know who is part of the solution. You know, sometimes we just can't do it all, even within the church. As a counselor, you may need some influence from the church, and from the church, you may need some influence from the counselor. So we want to know who's talking in that community. What I'm asking you, who watch this podcast, and this podcast is going to be on May the 11th, Facebook Live, Veterans Council of Veterans Inc., Facebook Live at 6:30, where you'll get a chance to hear this conversation, and you also have a chance to actually interact as well. So if you have any questions, ask your questions now on this post, on this Facebook post on the Veterans Council of Veterans Inc., or you can wait until we have the podcast and the interactive. You can ask the questions there, so we can get a better understanding of how faith can be a powerful force multiplier when it comes to suicide prevention. Again, this podcast is called Faith and Veteran Suicide. It's on Monday, May the 11th at 6:30 on Veterans Council of Veterans Inc. Facebook Live. This is Tony Williams from Veterans Council of Veterans, trying to do our part when it comes to preventing veteran suicide. Until then, see you Monday.